Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. I am so glad you are here, and today I'm going to talk about what Donald Trump announced on April 2, 2025. On April 2, 2025, former President Donald Trump announced that the United States would start charging new taxes, called tariffs, on things bought from other countries. A tariff is a special tax on goods that are imported from other countries. The purpose of these tariffs is to help American businesses by making goods from other countries more expensive. Trump believes this will encourage Americans to buy products made in the U.S. instead of from other countries. However, these new tariffs could have big effects on many countries and people worldwide. Let's take a look at how different countries could be affected by these new taxes. Effects on China. China is one of the countries that will be most affected by the new tariffs. The U.S. will place a 34% tax on many goods coming from China. This includes things like electronics, toys, clothing, and industrial products. China is a major supplier of goods to the U.S., so this new tariff will increase the price of many things that American people buy. China has already said that it will respond by putting tariffs on things imported from the U.S. such as soybeans, pork, and other agricultural products. This means that people in both China and the U.S. could face higher prices for many things. For example, American farmers who sell products like soybeans to China may see a drop in their sales because China is buying less from the U.S. This could lead to a loss of income for some American farmers. Additionally, businesses in the U.S. that rely on Chinese products may also struggle. Companies that sell electronics or other items made in China could have to raise their prices, which could lead to fewer people buying those products. Effects on the European Union. The European Union (EU), which includes many countries like Germany, France, and Italy, will also be affected by the new tariffs. The U.S. will place a 20% tax on many goods coming from EU countries. Some of the most important exports from the EU to the U.S. include cars, wine, and luxury goods like jewelry and clothing. The new tariffs could make these items more expensive for American buyers. For example, European cars such as BMW and Mercedes-Benz might become more expensive in the U.S. because of the 20% tax. European wines and cheeses, which are popular in the U.S., could also see higher prices. In return, the EU might decide to place tariffs on American goods coming into their countries. The EU might target things like American agricultural products, tech products, or even airplanes. This back and forth could lead to a trade war, where both sides keep raising taxes on each other's goods. This could make international trade more difficult and expensive for businesses and consumers in both the US and Europe. Effects on South Korea and Japan. South Korea and Japan will also be affected by the new U.S. tariffs. The U.S. will place a 25% tax on goods coming from South Korea, and a 24% tax on goods coming from Japan. These two countries are known for producing high-quality electronics and cars, so the new tariffs could make those products more expensive for American consumers. For example, South Korea is home to major electronics brands like Samsung and LG, and car brands like Hyundai and Kia. Japan has popular car brands like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. If the U.S. raises taxes on these products, it could make them too expensive for many American buyers. As a result, these countries may sell fewer products to the U.S., which could hurt their economies. In response, South Korea and Japan could raise their own tariffs on American products. They might place taxes on things like American cars, food, or machinery. This could hurt American businesses that rely on exports to these countries, leading to lower sales and potential job losses in certain industries. Effects on other countries. Many other countries will also be affected by the new tariffs. The U.S. will impose a 10% tax on goods coming from countries that are not specifically mentioned in the new tariff plan. This includes countries like Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and India, which are important trade partners for the U.S. For example, Canada is one of the largest suppliers of oil to the U.S. and also sells a lot of timber and agricultural products. Mexico is another important trading partner that sells things like cars, electronics, and food to the U.S. If the U.S. places a 10% tax on these goods, the prices of these products could go up. This could make it harder for people in the U.S. to afford things that are imported from these countries. For countries that export a lot of goods to the U.S. like Brazil and India, the new tariffs could hurt their economies as well. These countries might find it harder to sell products to American buyers because of the higher prices caused by the tariffs. This could lead to a drop in their exports and hurt their overall economic growth. Long-term effects of tariffs. While the goal of these tariffs is to protect American businesses and encourage people to buy products made in the U.S., the long-term effects could be more complicated. The higher prices on imported goods could reduce the amount of things that American consumers buy. For example, if electronics from China or cars from Japan become more expensive, people might decide not to buy them or look for cheaper alternatives. This could hurt American businesses that rely on these imported goods to make their own products. For example, companies that assemble electronics or cars in the U.S. might find that it costs them more to buy the parts they need. This could lead to higher prices for consumers or even job losses in some industries. Additionally, these tariffs could create trade tensions between the U.S. and other countries. If countries feel that the tariffs are unfair, they might stop doing business with the U.S. or place their own tariffs on American goods. This could hurt global trade and lead to less cooperation between countries, making it harder to grow the global economy. On the other hand, some American businesses could benefit from the tariffs. For example, if foreign goods become more expensive, American-made products might look like a better deal to consumers. This could help U.S. manufacturers, but it might not be enough to fully offset the negative effects of higher prices for other goods. On April 6, 2025, protests started to take place in different parts of the United States because of the new tariffs that were announced on April 2. People were upset about the potential effects these tariffs could have on their lives. They were worried that the higher prices of imported goods would make things more expensive for everyone, including everyday items like clothes, electronics, and even food. Reasons for the protest. There were many reasons why people took to the streets to protest. Here are some of the main reasons. 1. Higher prices. Many people were concerned that the tariffs would cause prices to go up, especially for things they buy regularly. Products made in other countries, like smartphones, computers, and cars, could become much more expensive. People worried that they wouldn't be able to afford these products anymore. 2. Job losses. Some workers were worried about losing their jobs because of the tariffs. Many businesses in the U.S. rely on imported goods from countries like China, Japan, and South Korea. If the price of those goods goes up, businesses may struggle to sell their products, and they might have to cut jobs. Workers in industries like electronics, retail, and manufacturing were particularly concerned. 3. Retaliation from other countries. Protesters also feared that other countries might respond to the tariffs by placing taxes on American products. This could make it harder for American businesses to sell their goods abroad. For example, farmers who sell food to countries like China and Mexico could face lower demand for their products, which could hurt their income and lead to job losses. 4. Impact on trade. Some people believed that the tariffs could lead to a trade war. A trade war happens when countries keep increasing taxes on each other's goods. This could lead to less trade between countries, making it harder for businesses to grow and affecting the economy in a negative way. Where the protests happened. The protests on April 6 took place in several major cities across the U.S. including New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. In these cities, large groups of people gathered to express their concerns about the tariffs. Some protesters carried signs that said things like "Don't tax us" and "Stop the trade war." What the protesters wanted. The people protesting on April 6 had different ideas about what should happen next. Some wanted the government to reverse the decision and not impose the tariffs at all. Others wanted to make sure that any new policies would protect American workers and businesses without hurting consumers. Protesters also called for better solutions to address the issues with trade, such as negotiating fairer trade deals with other countries. Reactions to the protests. The protests on April 6 received mixed reactions from the public and from the government. Some people agreed with the protesters and said that the tariffs would hurt ordinary people and workers. They believed that the U.S. should focus on creating policies that would help everyone, not just large businesses. On the other hand, some people supported the tariffs. They believed that the U.S. needed to stand up for itself and protect American businesses from unfair trade practices. These supporters argued that the tariffs would help create jobs in the U.S. by encouraging people to buy products made in the country instead of from abroad. The government, including some members of Congress, said that they were listening to the concerns of the protesters but still believed that the tariffs were necessary to help the economy in the long term. However, they promised to look into the effects of the tariffs and make changes if necessary. Moving forward. The protests on April 6 were just the beginning. People continued to voice their opinions, and discussions about the tariffs became a hot topic in the news and in politics. Many businesses, workers, and ordinary citizens hoped that their concerns would be heard and that the government would find a way to make sure the tariffs didn't hurt the economy too much. As time goes on, the effects of the tariffs and the protests will continue to unfold. People are watching closely to see how the government responds to the concerns of the public and whether the tariffs will cause more problems than they solve. The situation remains uncertain, and many are hoping that a solution will be found that helps both American businesses and consumers without causing too much harm to the global economy. Conclusion. The new tariffs announced by the U.S. on April 2, 2025, could have big effects on both the U.S. and other countries. While they might help American businesses in some areas, they could also lead to higher prices for many products and hurt global trade. Countries around the world could respond by placing their own tariffs on U.S. goods, which could make things even more expensive. The long-term effects of these tariffs will depend on how different countries react and how businesses and consumers adjust to the new trade rules. It's clear that these changes will have a big impact on the world economy, and it will take time to see what the final results will be. The story is over. Please support us by subscribing and liking to follow our channel. I hope you learned something new today. See you next time. Thanks for watching.